Hi, and welcome back to a lore and history video about the world of 3876 AD. In this and upcoming parts, I want to give you much more insight into each of the main characters with its own dedicated video. There's going to be a lot of trivia surrounding each character, so this should be quite interesting. Without further ado, kick your feet back, grab some popcorn or whatever you like, and let's start this. The first character I wanted to talk about is the main character of my upcoming game, Dark Delver. In this game, you play as the legendary war hero Kuno Lee Larsen. The specific image here actually shows him adrift in space. Basically, this is how you start the game. His only protection against the hazard that is open space is a damaged ancient combat suit. Since Dark Delver takes place in the post-3876 era, we can assume that he either had to put on this old spacesuit in a hurry, or he, in fact, had been in this situation for over 300 years, at least by now. Larsen holds the common title of Commander, and was one of the most instrumental people who brought about the age of the Earth military. During ancient times, he was the first to manage to apply mental techniques to influence the modification drones in his body. Over the course of many decades, he gradually regained parts of his consciousness through rigorous training during his ever more emergent glimmers of clarity. I already mentioned the new abilities people gain when using the mental techniques devised by the Earth military. This of course is going to be a whole topic by itself, so I will relegate this lore detail to its own dedicated video in the future, and only mention a few key differences here briefly. Larsen's abilities to influence the modification drones is unparalleled, even to this day. This makes it even more curious how he got himself into this situation in the first place. Dark Delver will focus on his journey back to Earth and his fight against the dangers of space. In this state, we can gather that he is in a rather bad shape. He clearly is missing one of his arms and a lower leg. Also, the combat suit he is wearing seems to be heavily damaged, calling into question how much protection he can still expect from it. It is his willpower alone that keeps him alive at this point. This is only because Larsen's ability to influence the modification drones is just so advanced. Even in a semi-conscious state, his focus hasn't let up, making it apparently possible to survive in such a hostile environment. Gravely wounded at that. As anyone else, Larsen is an immortal super soldier, and had been for quite some time. Like I mentioned in the first part, the modification drones can basically heal any injury and even revive someone from the dead. Would Larsen use the modification drones like they were being used in the pre-3876 era, he would die out here in space very easily. Still, after retrieving his body at some point, they could have just injected him with new modification drones and waited until his health would be restored. It is unclear how long this process would have taken back then. A standard practice of almost all factions in the pre-3876 era was to bring fallen soldiers back to life. Death as a concept of one's end did not really exist anymore. It might have taken several days or even weeks, but no matter the injury, the modification drones were always able to fix almost everything. In the post-3876 era, things work a little bit different. Because humans had now gained the ability to influence the modification drones, they were also able to use a variety of abilities to sustain one's life almost indefinitely. While only barely conscious, all remaining willpower Larsen has seems to flow directly into the circuitry of the modification drones, telling them to not abandon his body and instead seal his wounds and preserve his life. You can see in the image a trail of modification drones who follows him around as he helplessly floats in space. It is for that reason alone that Larsen can even go on with his adventure in the story of Dark Delver. As I mentioned in my first part, you will use many of these abilities to your advantage in the game. To cultivate these abilities in the population, people from the post-3876 era were inoculated with a new strain of modification drones developed by the Earth military. Mental markers were imprinted to make it easier for the afflicted to regain a bare minimum of self-awareness. The most important ability is what they would refer to as focus. With the most basic mental techniques, focus could be raised, which gives the user a basic control over the delirious state induced by the first strain of modification drones. The earliest days of the post-3876 era were spent bringing this new strain of modification drones to all humans. Larsen and his team of founders led something like a crusade into all inhabited worlds and converted the population. Space travel, in a broader sense, does not really exist in the pre-3876 era, and even in later times it is still only used sparsely. The specific technicalities of interstellar ventures and other unique behaviors of things like gravity and the speed of light, which play a role in deep space exploration, made it mostly impractical. For this reason, there were only a few places in our solar system and a little bit further out that needed to be considered. Some distant colonies were so isolated that they hadn't even realized the home world still existed. The Earth military was very quick to crush any opposing force and made their might known throughout all of mankind. Since no human had been untouched by the modification drones, there was no place where the population wasn't grateful for the arrival of the Earth military and their introduction of the new strain of modification drones. Most of the time, these groups had been just as war-torn as Earth itself, or even worse, they had already almost annihilated each other. It took the Earth military only a few decades to conquer all other factions and propagate their new strain of modification drones. After the Earth military took over, many things changed drastically. Suddenly, after countless centuries of endless warfare, an ominous peace had returned. Since Larsen was one of the founding members and most adept in using these new abilities, his importance during the Crusades was paramount. He was one of the leading figures in saving what was left of humanity, even as early as the last few years of the pre-3876 era. Much of his initial conquests for the Earth military were still during these ancient times. His long experience as an elite soldier who fought in many wars and led many battles into victory played a key role. When the presence of the Earth military was made apparent on the homeworld, the various militant factions on the Moon and the remaining rogue factions on Earth banded together in an attempt to stop the advancement of the Earth military, but without avail. The incursion on Moon territory was directly commanded by Larsen and his second-in-command. Together, they led a covert infiltration mission whilst pretending to start a large-scale interplanetary assault. After taking over one of the biggest warship factories in the western provinces of the Moon, the battle was already almost over. It took the Earth military medical staff some time to inoculate the population on the Moon, but eventually everyone was returned to their senses. With the large industrial power the Moon had to offer, reaching all other settlements in and around our solar system was no longer a problem. Ancient mining vessels were retrofitted for deep space missions to reach even the most remote places where humans had made space stations or planetary colonies their own war-torn hellscapes. Most notable colonies that the Earth military sought to liberate first were on Mars and the moon Europa, where the oldest civilizations existed. Further out, even beyond our solar system, there were mostly only space stations or mining colonies on rogue planets. It is unclear if humans ever managed to reach another star system within the time frame of the pre-3876 era, but it is possible. Records of these crusades are only hard to obtain and highly inaccurate at best. There is much mystery surrounding Larsen, especially since he was the first one to ever reach a cognitive lucidity high enough to overcome the influence of the modification drones, even if it was only partially at first. One of Larsen's closest friends, an artificial lifeform whose scientific knowledge goes beyond human understanding, never could get his head around how Larsen was able to achieve this unique mental state by himself. Larsen did not accompany the missions into the far reaches of space. His second-in-command took over instead. Together with all founding members, Larsen would return to Earth and start building a new society from the ashes of his violent past. The Earth military would adopt a very geocentric worldview and also return to a more archaic lifestyle. His first officer continued the Earth military crusades, and once he had returned, his path as a high-ranking commander in a newly established Moon Alliance was already foreseeable. Since then, the interests of Earth and the Moon started to drift apart greatly, as the former sought a less industrialized civilization, whilst the latter was looking forward to a spacefaring society. The conquest by the Earth military and the resulting creation of the Moon Alliance marked the ultimate turning point in history, where humanity had stopped perceiving the passage of time almost entirely. The people living in the post-3876 era will only refer to these past events as ancient history and mostly pay them no mind. Let's also talk about who Larsen actually is as a person. Sure, he's an immortal super soldier and evolved to be something even greater in time, but what does that mean in regards to his character? You can imagine that humans work very differently in the world of 3876 AD. Since ancient times, they had been injected with these modification drones, basically turning them into crazed weapons of war. On top of that, the Earth military came along over 1,000 years later and changed everything again, almost in a snap. Larsen's initial experiences were the same as for anyone else. When he first regained a glimmer of consciousness, he was in a state of shock and confusion. To this day, these moments of clarity seem to haunt him in his dreams. When he started to realize more and more what was going on around him and how humanity is about to spiral into total self-destruction, he knew something had to change, and he started to search for answers. Together with a few battle-tested comrades, he went deep into the undergrowth of what is now known as the Devon Forest, located to the east of the central continent. It was like a remnant of his old memories that drew him to this place. Maybe he had foreseen what was about to happen to humanity and left a message within his psyche. During his days of exploration, Larsen continuously expanded his influence and was able to gather a sizable army. Initially, there were many tricks Larsen had to use to help the afflicted regain their sense of self, but in time, he was able to bring someone back with nothing more than just a word. How this process worked back then is still unclear, but it paid off in the end. After many years, they finally had found what Larsen was looking for. Hidden away in the deepest caves of the Devon Forest, they found what was apparently his own creation, an artificial life form. It was a long-lost friend who would become one of the most important contributors to the success of the Earth military in the near future. Many of Larsen's comrades were the source for his strength. His friends were able to share with him the burden of this chaotic new reality. As you can imagine, waking up one day and realizing that you had been in a delirious state of constant aggression and warfare probably takes his toll on one's mind. Among others, he had also found solace in the company of a woman who joined the group not long after he started out to form the foundation for the Earth military. She later would go on to rule the settlements in the Devon Forest, the place she calls home. Close bonds of this nature were something humanity had lost almost completely. As you can imagine, a culture that lives in a total war every day had no use for bothersome emotions like affection and comfort. Even procreation was done mostly through artificial means. Most humans in the late pre-3876 era aren't even fertile. With the modification drones, the need for offspring and legacy had become obsolete. How Larsen was as a person before he had regained his sense of self is not clear. He must have been a very dangerous individual, as he is heralded as a war hero, a title probably not given lightly and not without a significant body count. By his companions during the creation of the Earth military, Larsen was described as a very calm and thoughtful individual. Despite still being a commander, his role as one of the first founders gave him the reputation of almost something like a sage. During the first few years of his command in the newly founded Earth military, his indulgent nature made many very receptive to the changes he brought about, but it also caused a few disruptions on the way. Things did not always turn out as expected. You could say that even the predicament he finds himself at the start of Dark Delver is due to his misplaced trust in individuals who were following an ulterior motive all along. There's still so much more to tell you about this character, but we probably have to end this somewhere and move on to the next one. I'm thinking of keeping this format of video. A 15 to 20 minute lore bite seems appropriate for now, but I might do even longer videos in the future. If that's what you are looking for, let me know in the comments below. I hope you learned a thing or two more about the world of 3876 AD. Thanks so much for watching. Please like and share this video, subscribe to the channel if that's your thing, and I will see you soon. Cheers!